Good morning, gardeners, and welcome to Wednesday, July 19th. My name is Catherine, and I created a show called Good Morning Gardeners, even though I can't grow green things because I am referring to gardening metaphorically. We're planting the seeds for a better day. We're starting our morning by getting in the right mindset to cultivate a better life for ourselves, better communities, and a better world. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to add Good Morning Gardeners to your morning routine. I do my best to wake you up with positive and mentally stimulating ideas, but sometimes I do miss things. If you have something to add to the ideas I discussed today, please chime in the comments section below. As a reminder, I will be on vacation starting July 24th, and I will be back with you again on August 1st. During this time, I won't be posting new videos or responding to comments, but feel free to go back and watch any old videos you haven't seen yet to maintain this part of your morning routine. And if you want to comment on any of those older videos, I will read all of your comments when I return. Today's Daily Stoic reading, titled "Forgive Them Because They Don't Know," begins with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. As Plato said, every soul is deprived of truth against its will. The same holds true for justice, self-control, goodwill to others, and every similar virtue. It's essential to constantly keep this in your mind, for it will make you more gentle to all. The authors go on to provide some commentary of the biblical Jesus execution story. If you're at all familiar with the New Testament, chances are you've heard the phrase, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." That's where the authors of the Daily Stoic have chosen to go with this quote, but I am not really a huge fan of their take. This is partly because I personally have heard this quote so many times that I hate it. It's kind of like a song that has been so overplayed that you can't appreciate it musically anymore and you just cringe every time you hear it. It's also because I think the way that this phrase, and also like the concept of forgiveness in general, has been used to perpetuate abuse and to make excuses for abusers for a long time. This may be an unpopular opinion, but I'm not a huge fan of the whole forgiveness rhetoric. I think if you are the kind of person who is likely to forgive someone for hurting you, you are also likely to be the kind of person who lets that person take advantage of you and continue to hurt you again and again as you continue to forgive them again and again. Don't get me wrong. I do believe that there is merit to the idea of achieving personal, internal, mental, and emotional freedom by forgiving someone. But from what I've observed, this usually isn't the way that forgiveness is used. I think that forgiveness is very commonly weaponized by the people demanding to be forgiven. Usually, these people demand to be forgiven. After all, forgiving them is the right thing to do so that they can avoid the consequences of their actions and continue to hurt people. Yesterday, I spoke extensively about personal boundaries, and because the topic of forgiveness flows so naturally from this, I think I'd like to take this opportunity to explore the concept of forgiveness, including when and where it actually is helpful. I'm going to start by reading from You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero for our learning moment today. The chapter called Forgive or Fester begins with a quote from actress, writer, comedienne, and absurdist Lily Tomlin. Forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past. When is the last time that you physically hurt yourself? What did you do to get the pain to stop? And how long did you wait to do something about it? When we're in physical pain, we're usually extremely proactive about figuring out how to make it go away immediately because, it hurts. Even if we have to go through more pain from pouring a disinfectant that stings on an open wound or suffering through getting stitches, we do it right away because we're very focused on our ultimate goal, relief. When it comes to our emotional pain, however, we're apparently way more game for seeing just how much torture we can endure, wallowing in our guilt, shame, resentment, and self-loathing, sometimes for entire lifetimes. We prolong our misery by holding on to our ill feelings, by bad-mouthing our mother-in-laws, also known as mothers-in-law, fantasizing about pantsing our loudmouth incompetent boss in front of a whole office, unloading fault on other people, and rolling around in our minds the many reasons why our enemies are wrong and the many reasons why we are right. The moment you decide to forgive and let your negative feelings melt away, you are on the road to freedom. Forgiveness is all about taking care of you, not the person you need to forgive. It's about putting your desire to feel good before your desire to be right. It's about taking responsibility for your own happiness instead of just pretending it's in someone else's hands. It's about owning your power by giving all your anger, resentment, and hurt the heave-ho. Holding on to resentment is like taking poison and waiting for your enemies to die. If you're having issues with someone you care about, explain how you feel without putting the blame on them, and regardless of the outcome, forgive them. Your talk may bring you closer together, or you may discover that you don't want to hang out with them as much at all. But either way, if you want to be free, you have to let it go. If you're feeling hurt or resentful towards some a-hole you don't care about, free yourself and let it go instead of stewing on it or getting revenge by sending them a box of rats in the mail. Why do you care if they understand how lame they are or not? What good does that do to you? And don't pretend it's because you want them to become a better person. You could care less. You want retribution or an apology or to be acknowledged as right. Get over it. Let it go. The longer you stay attached to being vindicated, the longer they hang around in your consciousness, stinking up your life. Do not fall prey to the false belief that by forgiving someone, you're letting them off the hook. Because when you forgive someone, you let yourself off the hook. Forgiving isn't about being nice to them. It's about being nice to yourself. So Jen Sincero goes on to provide multiple strategies for how to force yourself to forgive someone who has wronged you. But I'm not going to read that part of the book today because, and maybe I'm projecting, but I somehow doubt that you guys need it. If you're listening to me this morning, we probably have several things in common. We might both have a morning routine, or we might both be interested in reading a lot of books or learning new things. We might also be naturally inclined to empathize with other people. We might also be fairly open-minded. We might both enjoy overanalyzing things. I have never been comfortable with labeling certain people as bad or evil. I have never been able to simply accept that someone who hurt me is just bad news or disturbed and cut them off and leave it at that. My brain wants to dig into their trauma, to analyze their behavior patterns, so that I can deduce in exactly which ways they are disturbed. And then, if I can do that, I want to help them. I want to convince them to get the kind of therapy they need, to meditate, to read books that will help them. I want to be the spark that ignites the light of their new life. I want to say just the right thing, act in just the right way, to get them to turn a new corner and evolve into a better person. But wait, let's go back. How did this all start? Oh yeah, it started with someone who hurt me. So if someone has hurt me and I'm putting all this energy into helping them, I'm making myself even more vulnerable to being hurt again and again and again. If you're like me in this way, you don't need to learn how to forgive people who hurt you because it comes naturally to you. You need to learn how to forgive people less, not in a way that causes you to harbor resentment, but in a way that encourages you to enforce firm boundaries. For our feel-good moment, I am going to address another aspect of forgiveness that, if you are like me, you really need to hear. It's not about forgiving other people. It's about forgiving yourself. I'm going to read from Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, starting with a section titled, Forgive Yourself as Well as Others. Not only do we incur emotional wounds from others, most of us inflict them upon ourselves. We beat ourselves over the head with self-condemnation, remorse, and regret. We beat ourselves down with self-doubt. We cut ourselves up with excessive guilt. Remorse and regret are attempts to emotionally live in the past. Excessive guilt is an attempt to make right in the past something we did wrong or thought of as wrong in the past. Emotions are used correctly and appropriately when they help us respond or react appropriately to some reality in the present environment. Since we cannot live in the past, we cannot appropriately react emotionally to the past. The past can be simply written off, closed, forgotten, insofar as our emotional reactions are concerned. We do not need to take an emotional position one way or the other regarding detours that might have taken us off course in the past. The important thing is our present direction and our present goal. We need to recognize our own errors as mistakes. Otherwise, we could not correct course. Steering or guidance would be impossible, but it is futile and fatal to hate or condemn ourselves for our mistakes. You make mistakes. Mistakes do not make you. In thinking of our own mistakes, it is helpful and realistic to think of them in terms of what we did or did not do, rather than in terms of what the mistakes made us. One of the biggest mistakes we can make is to confuse our behavior with our self, to conclude that because we did a certain act, it characterizes us as a certain sort of person. It clarifies thinking if we can see that mistakes involve something we do. They refer to actions, and to be realistic, we should use verbs denoting the action rather than nouns denoting a state of being in describing them. For example, to say, I failed, verb form, is but to recognize an error and can help lead to future success. But to say, I am a failure, noun form, does not describe what you did, but what you think the mistake did to you. This does not contribute to learning, but tends to fixate the mistake and make it permanent. This has been proved over and over in clinical psychologic experiments. We seem to recognize that all children, in learning to walk, will occasionally fall. We say, he fell, or he stumbled. We do not say, he is a faller, or he is a stumbler. However, many parents do fail to recognize that all children, in learning to talk, also make mistakes or non-fluences, hesitation, blocking, repetition of syllables and words. It is a common experience for an anxious, concerned parent to conclude he is a stutterer. Such an attitude or a judgment, not of the child's actions, but of the child himself, gets across to the child, and he begins to think of himself as a stutterer. His learning is fixated, and the stutter tends to become permanent. According to Dr. Wendell Johnson, the nation's foremost authority on stuttering, this sort of thing is the cause of stuttering. He has found that the parents of non-stutterers are more likely to use descriptive terms. He did not speak, whereas the parents of stutterers were inclined to use judgmental terms. He could not speak. Writing in the Saturday Evening Post on January 5, 1957, Dr. Johnson said, "Slowly we began to comprehend the vital point that had been missed for so many centuries. Case after case had developed, after it had been diagnosed, as stuttering by over-anxious persons unfamiliar with the facts of normal speech development. The parents, rather than the child, the listeners rather than the speakers, seem to be the ones most requiring understanding and instruction." Dr. Knight Dunlap, who made a 20-year study of habits, their making, unmaking, and relation to learning, discovered the same principle applied to virtually all bad habits, including bad emotional habits. It was essential, he said, that the patient learn to stop blaming himself, condemning himself, and feeling remorseful over his habits if he were to cure them. He found particularly damaging the conclusion that I am ruined or I am worthless because the patient had done or was doing certain acts. So remember, you made mistakes. Mistakes don't make you anything. So just one caveat, I know that this book is old and the studies on stuttering might be outdated. If Maxwell Maltz, needs to be corrected, please correct us in the comments section because, yeah, I don't want to perpetuate false information. But regardless of where the science and studies are at with stuttering, I do think that, the emotional piece of this is sound. So for our focus moment this morning, I want you to think about the voices in your head. They don't have to be literal audible voices. Just consider your own thoughts, specifically the thoughts that might take on a judgmental or even punishing tone. I believe that as we make the transition from childhood to adulthood, we don't transform at our core from children to adults. I think that the adult builds up around the inner child, and now it's the responsibility of this outer adult to parent the inner child. Many of us would say that we are our own worst critic. In fact, I find this phrase to be quite normalized in most social circles, and even sometimes it takes on a weird form of humble bragging. If you think of yourself as your own worst critic, I'm not judging you because I am the same way. But I want you to think about your inner child. It might help you to picture a small child in your life right now, a son or a daughter, niece or nephew. If you've seen photos or videos of yourself as a small child, you can also imagine yourself at this age. Think about your cute little chubby cheeks and big, innocent eyes. When you criticize yourself, this is who you are hurting. Just like the parents of children who stuttered made the condition permanent by labeling them stutterers, assuming that's true, any label you put on yourself is heard by your inner child, and this can make that label stick. If you take the time to really sit with this idea, it can be very painful. But if your inner child has taken a lot of abuse, I think it's really important to go through that pain so that you can begin practicing compassion for yourself. The first step is to separate your past mistakes from your identity. Next, you can start to forgive yourself for making those mistakes. Remember, by refusing to forgive yourself, by holding on to resentment, judgment, and shame, you are not helping anyone. You are not enacting some sort of cosmic justice. You are only holding yourself back from fulfilling your potential by choosing to live in the past. And this potential that I speak of might be something that can improve the lives of others in a big way. It might even be something that can make the world a better place. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I will speak with you again tomorrow.